Welcome back to the Healthy Campus program. My name is Leila Abdool, and today we'll be talking about all things disability with Dr. Leila Abdool Gafoor from the University of Johannesburg as a psychologist in PsyCad. How are you?
Good, thank you, and yourself, and thank you for having me here today.
Well, it's a pleasure, and you're looking absolutely amazing.
Oh, thank you, that's very kind.
But first, I just want to know a bit about your childhood and what inspired you or motivated you to go into the psychologist industry.
Okay, I'm someone who's always enjoyed children. I've always enjoyed being with children, taking care of children. You know, it's just something that I'm passionate with. I'm a mother myself.
Yeah.
I'm a mother of 3 boys. It's just something that I've really enjoyed. And being in the helping industry is something that I've always wanted to be in. So it became natural that I would want to work with children and become a psychologist.
Okay, and then how did the journey start with working for PsyCad?
Okay, so after my master's, I did my internship at PsyCad. When I finished my internship, I was then offered a temp position at PsyCad, and then a permanent position opened up. I applied, and I've been there since.
Yeah. Okay, no, that's interesting. That's interesting. But we're talking all things disability.
Yes.
I think there's a topic that is really, people really speak about. You
Yes.
know? And I think it's very interesting for us to now tackle, especially with students, because this is at a time where someone is living with a disability and they're in a position where they are surrounded by students who sometimes have never really seen someone with this kind of a disability, and that they might feel like discriminated just because of how they look. So how do you deal with students who are battling with that, first of all?
Okay, so we have something called a Disability Ambassador Program, where we have students which are with disabilities and without disabilities that are trained in terms of psychosocial support and psychosocial education around disability. They have these beautiful pink berets, I wish I brought one with me,
Okay.
And I would have showed you, that they wear around campus, and we run a lot of awareness events and campaigns on our social media. Every single week we have a different type of disability that we are showcasing. And please follow us on Facebook, and you will be able to see all of the different work that we do. We do also have designated computer rooms for our students with disabilities, and I noticed that especially the beginning of the year, those who don't really know anyone spend a lot of time in that computer room and get to know other students, and slowly they then expand, and one day we just don't see them anymore in our computer room, and we realize that they've made friends on campus.
Yeah.
I think students with disabilities, like any other student, has to adjust to varsity. So it's just a student thing about getting used to other people. Having a disability, especially if it's a visual disability that's on the outside, is something that is difficult. I think it is something to deal with, but our students are so resilient. And at PsyCad, we also do offer services like therapy. So if there is a student with a disability that is struggling psychosocially, we also put in that support.
Okay, no, I like that. But what kind of disability, I want to say disability care, that you provide for the disability students in your unit?
So the most important thing for us is to make sure that students with disabilities go from first year to graduation in as few years as possible. Okay. So they make it through the cycle successfully, and they are supported and provided the emotional support, the concessional support, so that's a reasonable accommodation in terms of their tests and exams and their access to classes and accommodation and things like that, so they can make it through successfully. So it's about evening that playing field, taking the little disadvantages that a person may have as a disability and trying to take that away so that they have the best chance of making it through.
And you have worked at PsyCad for the longest.
Yes.
Right? And with children. But what are the most common challenges that you probably face when you have to deal with the students?
I think the challenges that students with disabilities face are pretty much the challenges that most of our students face, which is financial ones, issues at home, relationship difficulties. I think we sometimes forget that people with disabilities are also people themselves.
Yeah, they're also human.
So they're also human. So they have exactly the same issues. residence issues, accommodation issues, food issues, being able to afford textbooks, being able to afford fees, NASFAS issues, you know, all of the normal issues that a student has, they have in addition to some of the disability issues. But because a lot of them have been disabled for such a long time, they found a way to navigate that, to accommodate themselves, to overcome some of those barriers. So as I mentioned, a lot of the issues are the issues that our students at UJ in general suffer from.
I'm speaking about challenges, but I think based on what you're telling me, I would also want to know what are some of the positives that you have seen since you've started? And I'm seeing a smile on your face.
Because I see some of my students, I mean, I had one student who, you know, came from Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
He has a disability. For the first 6 months, he had no friends. He used to eat lunch on the ledge outside my office, so he could see me working, so he had a friend.
Yeah.
You know, he had someone that he could see. And the one day, I just didn't see him there anymore. And I said to one of my staff members, what's happened to him? I haven't seen him. And they said, no, he made a friend. You know, so it's incredible seeing growth. It's incredible seeing some of my blind students which are stuck on Braille and can only use Braille move to software, which means that they can now go to the world of work. It's amazing to see students graduate that you started with in undergrad. It's amazing to sometimes see a student who started in undergrad who is now graduated and in the working world send you a message on LinkedIn to say, hi, I'm now working at KPMG, you know, and I now have this amazing job, which is fantastic. And it's kind of close to my heart to see that happen.
Oh, man. But, you know, I'm actually wondering, because I've never been in a situation where I've experienced someone or seen someone with a disability. Let's say someone is blind, and you, obviously the university, it's an environment where you have to read, where you have to engage with the slides.
Yes.
So how do the students navigate around that actually?
So the students come through to the disability unit and they provide us with all of the medical documentation to be able to show us exactly what they are suffering from. So for example, with someone who is blind, that means they have the less than 10% vision. But that could mean that they are completely blind. They could see a little bit of color. They could see gray. Every single person's eyesight is completely different.
Yeah.
We then engage with their lecturers and we get all of the content beforehand, which we then get an editor to edit so that it is in a different version that software can read for them.
Okay.
And the students then study via the edited version. Their lecturers are made aware by the students, because we give them a letter to give their lecturers to say that they have a disability, they're accommodated in the classroom appropriately.
Yeah.
But this is where it's important for the student that is disabled to come through to the disability unit and say, I need help, so that they can be identified and they can be supported from day one of their studies. Because I think it makes a big difference to be on the right foot and to have everything you need from day one. You know, later on in the year, please come to us. You're more than welcome to. But it's difficult because you have so much to catch up because you've missed so much.
Yeah. But, you know, the university takes in a lot of students in the beginning of the year. And as a first year student with a disability, how do I know that there is a disability unit that can help me?
So first of all, when you apply at UJ, 1 page of the application form is on disability.
Okay.
And it asks you to please declare disability. It also clearly states that if you don't declare disability, it would be very hard for us to try and locate you. We do have a dashboard where if people do declare disability during application, you know, we can try and we contact all of those students at the beginning of the year. But that form also says at the bottom that if you need reasonable accommodation, please contact us and gives them details so they can try and get support. We also do have a separate orientation at UJ for students with disabilities.
Okay.
And we have a module on Blackboard. And in addition, we put up pop-ups and notifications and we send a circular at the beginning of the year. But I think somewhere along the way as a first year student, you're so overwhelmed by just being at varsity and everything being so new that there's just a lot.
Yeah.
So sometimes people do fall through the loopholes. And we hope that through word of mouth and advertising and things like that, people do come through to us.
But you know, the University of Johannesburg is such a big university with, I think, 4 campuses, right? How are you ensuring that in all campuses, students are catered for?
We have a disability unit at each campus.
Okay.
And in each library, we have a computer space, besides computer spaces in the disability units on each campus. So there is space for all of the students. And what we try and do is move software and hardware and things like that around based on what the students need, based on which students are on each campus in a particular year based on disability.
I like that. But how do you collaborate with the faculties in the universities to ensure that the students are being helped?
So when a student gets a concession, they get a specific letter that they take to their lecturers. So the lecturers and the HODs have to sign, so faculties then know what support they need. And most of our students with disabilities write tests and exams with us anyway. So it's important for the faculties to know, because we need to get the tests and the exam papers sent through to us.
I have an interesting question here. How can the university, community, and the public contribute to fostering a more inclusive and accommodating environment for students with disability?
I think that's quite an interesting question. I think UJ does quite a phenomenal job doing that already. I know that UJ's infrastructure is constantly being worked on to try and accommodate our students with disabilities.
Yeah.
I know that through our ambassador program, we've been able to reach out to a lot of people. I know in general, the UJ staff have been incredible in terms of saying, if the student doesn't come through to us, I have this student who is in my class who has this disability, what can I do?
Yeah.
So I think it really is about asking. I think there are things we can change in terms of being a little bit more aware of certain things. Within the disability unit, we've actually developed a little book called a lecturer's guide, which helps people if they have students in their class per disability. It's divided into disabilities, what to do, how to help them in class, how to accommodate them, what type of support they need. I think it's all about the etiquette. So I think the easiest thing to do in today's day and age is if you meet someone with a particular disability, sit and Google it, you know. Look up in terms of what you can do, what you shouldn't do. If you're unsure about anything, please contact us.
Yeah.
You know, that's why we are there. We often set up sessions with different departments to try and train them. So for example, the security at UJ, the staff have been trained on how to work with disabilities. We're currently in the process of training new staff in the reses on how to work with students with disabilities. So it really is about, if you see something, ask.
I like that. You know, this reminds me, when I was doing my undergrad, there was actually a guy that we were living with, because I was living in a commune, with a disability. But it's something that I've never seen before. And I asked him, what's your story? And then he told me, no, this is a rare situation. Just a few people in the world have this kind of disability.
What was it?
I'm just not sure of the name again, because it's a tongue twister name.
Okay.
But I was just like, interesting. But I just loved how he just persevered through all what people were saying and feeling judged, which is leading me to my next question, is that what are some of the misconceptions and stigmas that are connected with students with disability and also in higher learning education?
I think the fact that they can't do certain things and that the fact that they always need help. I think it's always important to ask a person with a disability if they need help, and if they don't need help to let them be, because I think our focus of the disability unit is to take a student that by the time they graduate, they're completely independent so that they're ready to go into the world of work. And I think that is a little bit of a misconception. I think the other conception is that you could look at yourself, you could look at me, and because we may have invisible disabilities, nobody may know what we may or may have.
Yeah.
I think it's a misconception that disability is always something that we can see. I mean, a lot of our students at UJ have learning disabilities, which you definitely cannot see. But you can see when they start studying and writing tests and exams and things like that. So I think a lot of disabilities are invisible and we just don't see it.
So if a student comes to you with a disability, how do you ensure the confidentiality about their matter to them?
Okay, so first of all, the student would come through to the disability unit, and then they would then go through our caseworker, who would then screen. There's specific documentation we need. We need medical documentation to ensure that the student is disabled, but I'm interested in the diagnosis, the prognosis, the treatment plan, so that by the time the student comes to me or any of the other caseworkers, we know exactly what is wrong with the student. One person, say with CP, is completely different with another person with CP. Every single person's body is different, your pathology is different, your diagnosis is different, your prognosis is different. So things change dramatically between people. And it's important that when you do come through with the documentation, we can then see what you need. And once we know what you need, we can put it into place. UJ also has a concessions committee. So although I can give provisional concessions at UJ, a committee still sits and looks at every single person's medical documents and decides whether the concession that I provided was the right one for that student and whether additional measures need to be put into place. So every single student is thought of by an entire committee and not just the caseworkers and myself.
Wow, it seems like the university is actually doing a lot.
The university actually does an amazing job supporting students with disabilities.
Wow, I can see that. But, you know, we're speaking about positives. Let's speak about bigger positives now. How do you see the future for the institution in terms of like helping students with disability in the future? Because yes, there is doing a lot, but do you think there's also room for improvement? And what is that room for improvement that needs to be done?
Look, I think there is always room for improvement. I think one of the biggest difficulties that our students with disabilities and our students in general have are financial issues. So I think sometimes, you know, being able to access medical care easily and things like that is something that is tricky, especially when it comes to concessions and we require medical documentation. You know, sometimes the wait at Helen Joseph is a little bit longer and things like that. But we try and support wherever we can and write letters, you know, to send them through. I have something called the practitioner form where when a student goes through to a doctor, instead of the student having to ask for certain documents, that form already has all the questions so that I get all the answers I want. Because we noticed a student would go to a doctor and they would get a letter and it would still be missing a lot of the info that I required. So I think there always is room for improvement, but I do think that, you know, you try the best you can.
I like that. Okay, let's do this, right? There's a student who is doing their matric year, and they're very interested in going into varsity, coming to UJ, but they have a disability and they're a bit afraid that, you know, I'd feel judged. Am I going to be capable in a high-pressure environment like university? What would you say to the students? So I want you to look at that camera.
Okay.
And tell the students how will they be able to navigate it? They shouldn't be afraid and so forth. So take it away.
Please don't be scared. We have lots of matriculant students who contact us. I actually met one last week. All you need to do is book an appointment with us. We will sit with you. We will chat to you. The most important thing for us to try and find is, with your disability and with your academic performance, the right course. So we need to find the right course that takes into account your disability so that we are focusing on the things that you are good at your strengths and things like that in terms of your disability, so that placement is correct. And then know that there's support at the university, you know. It is reasonable accommodation, so we try and assist you the best that we can. But please come through and please contact us, because a lot of matriculants do. And it's really exciting to see you guys and to know that you guys are coming up the next year.
I like that. Definitely the University of Johannesburg is doing a lot in supporting students, and with also your work that you're doing in the psychology industry. Wow, thank you so much for your insights today.
No, it's a
I
pleasure.
actually learned a lot to see how the university is actually supporting students with disability, and there's nothing wrong if you have a disability and you can still make it and graduate at the end of the year.
Of course, our students with disabilities in some of the faculties are some of the highest performers.
Oh, wow.
So our students are absolutely incredible. And I think it's always important to remember that it is a student first before a person with a disability.
Oh, yeah. Definitely, definitely. No, thank you so much for your insights. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Pleasure.
And this is how we end the episode. I am joined by Dr. Leila. It was a beautiful session, knowing that if you have a disability, you can still make it, and there's nothing stopping you, even if you have to go to a higher institution. My name is Sally Sitole, and this is Where We Live It today for the Healthy Campus program. Goodbye.
The University of Johannesburg, the future reimagined.